Sarah Game is the One Nation MLC in the South Australian Parliament. Thanks for joining us again, Sarah.
Good morning.
Sarah, look, first of all, we do notice that your position you took on the voice to Parliament for the South Australian Parliament, people often, we talked about last time, don't realise the Malinauskas government's trying to do the same as what the Albanese government's doing, but you've smoked out the Liberals. They've ended up supporting your position.
I think that's absolutely correct, and I would say that I think they've realised with the position that I've taken that there's been a huge amount of public support for that. And I do think that's given some of them a bit of confidence to do the right thing and vote no on this piece of legislation, which is actually much more out of control than last time we spoke, now that I have the advanced version of the bill.
Yeah, we were talking last time about the lack of detail, and it looks like the Malinauskas government's provided some more detail, but as you say, it doesn't necessarily satisfy people to the extent that in the opposition's case, they've said, well, it's so bad we can't support it.
That's right. I mean, they've taken a bit of a different line, saying that they're not happy with the amount of detail and the presentation of the bill, whereas I've always been clear from the beginning that I don't support this approach at all. And the whole concept of race-based support is something that I object to, and I think that we need to be moving to a situation where we look at needs-based support, not race-based support. I mean, many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders are doing as well as non-Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. And also the vast majority of people in poverty or homeless in this state are in fact not Aboriginal. So I don't support it based on that concept. The Liberal Party have come around sort of blaming, I guess, lack of detail and the way the legislation set out. And they do have a point, because it is quite shocking, actually. I mean, we've heard the government say that we were going to have these 40 elected members, but actually there's no number stipulated in the piece of legislation. So it's open-ended how many elected members the government really is proposing to have. And the other really concerning new piece of information that came out in the adjusted bill recently is the ability for the state-based voice to basically create an infinite number of additional committees that would all have to be manned by additional members, in addition to that 40 or 50. And really the only sort of reining in of that is the Attorney General's approval for those committees to be established and resourced.
It's a phenomenal number. You mentioned there, 40 possible, if not more, representatives, elected representatives in this separate voice to the South Australian Parliament. The Parliament itself has only 69 MPs.
Well, it's just ridiculous. I mean, I think, we've got an Aboriginal population of about, 2.4%, and we're looking at, 50, 60 plus elected members. The government haven't answered my question about how much these members are going to be paid. And it just really reads as a blank cheque, to be honest. It just simply ensures that these committees, however many there are, that these elected members, however many there are, will all be resourced appropriately. And I think it's very concerning that this piece of legislation looks set to go through.
Yeah, that's the point I was looking at, just the composition of the upper house. You're on the crossbench, but what potentially with the Greens, with their two MLCs, Labor could get this through just with their support?
Well, the Greens and SA Best have made it clear that they absolutely support this piece of legislation. And so certainly through the upper house, and I really imagine through the lower house, this is going to get through. And the point that I would make really clearly is this piece of legislation is not about, for me, enhancing the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. And it should never have been called The Voice. I mean, the name of The Voice simply makes people feel, plays on the compassion of people, and they think, yes, we do want them to have a voice. But this piece of legislation is about establishing an enormous layer of bureaucracy and benefiting a few people, elected members, and really is not going to change much else.
All right, we need to check in on a couple of other topics with you. You did make a move recently on the issue of medicinal cannabis and driving. The legalised cannabis MLCs that were recently elected in Victoria have made a similar move to yourself. Is there growing support for trying to address those who have actually been prescribed medicinal cannabis being allowed to... I mean, how do we work this when you've got a no-tolerance drug driving approach?
Exactly, and I want to be really clear. I certainly don't support anybody driving under the influence of drugs. And this is really about allowing people who need prescription medicinal cannabis for pain or spasms or MS conditions, and they take this medicinal cannabis at night. They wake up in the morning, any real impairment is then disappeared. However, they still have traces of the THC in their body, and they would lose their license immediately. And I also just want to make clear for anyone listening who thinks, oh, this sounds, maybe like a bad idea. This is what's happening all around the world now. So in Canada, in France, the Netherlands, Belgium, there are acceptable levels of medicinal cannabis or THC that can be found in bodily fluids, and you are able to drive. And they would never random test you for medicinal cannabis unless there was a reason to do so. So this is certainly a move that, yes, is happening in other states like Tasmania, and certainly talk in many other states as well. But it is an already established situation in many other countries around the world. We are unique here in this sort of high-level, random medicinal cannabis roadside testing and immediate loss of licence. So what my bill does is essentially provide the potential for a complete defence. If someone were found with cannabis or THC in their bloodstream, provided they meet 3 criteria, and they are that 1, they've got a valid prescription, and 2, that they're not found to be impaired in any way on a roadside test, and 3, that they were not pulled over for any reason to do with negligent driving.
And I do note that the Road Safety Minister, Joe Zockhart, said that driving with detected THC has been an offence with loss of licence since 2006. They're not currently making any planned amendments to drug driving laws in any capacity, but they will continue to receive updated advice and give consideration to emerging science and any future developments. Is that good enough from the state government?
It's not good enough, but I think they've realised they've made a bit of a mistake. They've announced recently this crackdown of immediate loss of licence, and I think they are realising that they've made a mistake. It's not good enough because there's many tens of thousands of people who are reliant on this prescription medicinal cannabis, and they need it for pain and spasms and various relief. And these people often have disabilities. They're already to some extent isolated potentially. It's not easy for them to necessarily get out and take public transport. And we're further isolating these people by stopping them from driving when they're on their medication, despite there being no evidence that they're impaired.
Now, on another topic, you've been talking about ministerial travel. Now, I don't know if this is around the commentary from some of your parliamentary colleagues about Minister Close's trip to Europe during the River Murray flooding, but what are you trying to get out in terms of public transparency about ministers when they travel overseas?
Well, I just feel that public confidence in politicians generally doing the right thing is quite low, and I feel that there's been a number of trips exposed in the media recently that appear very extravagant. There was the Premier's $150,000 trip to Korea and Japan. There was the Treasurer's $78,000 trip to the United States. And when the costing behind those trips is not provided in a timely and detailed manner, I think it leaves the public to really question whether politicians are doing the right thing. And so really inspired by that, I've got today that I'm going to be introducing a ministerial travel report amendment bill, which would require all ministers who travel interstate or overseas to provide a detailed report within 30 days, disclosing exactly what's spent in an itemised way, right down to beverages and so on. And then tabling that to Parliament within six days, because frankly, they're spending public money. And the public have a right to know how these ministers are spending their money when they're travelling.
So, for instance, if they put a bottle of Penfolds Grange on the table to win a trade deal, that's going to be disclosed fairly soon afterwards.
Absolutely.
Now, Sarah, just before you go, and I haven't mentioned this in the lead-up, but the duck hunting inquiry, it sounds like the Parliament is going to, or the government is going to put something up to review South Australia's duck hunting laws. You across this one at all, or we've got an immediate reaction to where they're heading with this?
Look, no, I haven't come across that yet, only that I'd say that there seems to be a general crackdown on shooters and hunters that seems to be not have much sort of evidence behind it. But I haven't looked into that one, but I certainly will when it comes to the upper house.
Be a good topic for our next chat. Sarah Game from One Nation in South Australia. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much.